Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Sedie.
Hello, fellow do-gooders and friends. I'm your host, Corinna Sedie, an activist who's passionate about social impact and building a better, more sustainable future. Every week, I invite you to care a little bit more so that together we can all create a better world. And today, I'm thrilled to be joined with a friend in the world of podcasting who's working to ensure that we do just that we create a more just, equitable world for everyone. Sedruola Maruska is a social justice, equity, inclusion, and diversity consultant and coach. She hosts the award-winning podcast called Diversity Dish, enjoys public speaking, and is an aspiring author. She's even a graphic artist who has a BA from Andrews University. Her passion is helping individuals and business cultivate cultures of equity and inclusion so they attract the diverse partnerships that they desire to build. Sedie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Corinna. It's good to be here.
Well, it's exciting. I always love interviewing other podcasters because, for one, we tend to not have the audio issues of some others. And also, it's just really nice to connect and get to know one another's shows. I've had the pleasure of listening to a few of yours, and I enjoy just the overall production and how you cover sensitive topics. So, before we get into that, though, I'd like to understand a little bit more about your background in another spot that I didn't cover in your intro. And that is your background as a conversational English teacher.
Yeah.
So the reason I bring this up is I want to know what it's like to do something like teach conversational English when language is so rapidly changing, especially if you happen to be teaching people who do not come from this country or don't have English as a first language.
Yeah. So that was many years ago. And I actually lived in Korea for 10 months and taught conversational English there. And the beautiful thing about it was that the students were very eager to learn, of course, because they were doing it and many of them were adults out of school, but they were doing it so that they could get promotions at work. And what it forced me to do, though, was to slow down and to be a better listener because they were learning how to enunciate different things in English. And I was teaching them that, but I was also wanting to hear who they were. So I had to listen intently, and maybe sometimes they didn't have the right words, but I had to be able to say, okay, they probably mean this, and then kind of dig into that more. So it was a real foray, if you would, in true communication, because I feel that the harder it is sometimes for you to have the same words, the deeper the more intent you are on being able to understand someone that you're speaking to.
Yeah. And I just have to say, having the experience of living in another culture just generally makes you more empathetic as a human being about what it's like to try to get by in a space that feels a little foreign.
Absolutely. I say all the time that it was the best thing that I ever did for my future self, was going to Korea and teaching conversational English and being there for 10 months, being away from family, being away from all those comfort things, all the things that were home, and just going out and saying, I can do this, and just meeting a whole new group of people and a whole new way of life. It was the best thing I ever did for my future self, because like I said, it forced me to look at communication very closely and differently. And we don't realize how fast we talk.
Right.
Everyone in their own language, the language that they're comfortable in, they speak very fast. We speak very fast, but it forced me to slow down, which forced me to slow down my thinking, slow down my speaking, slow down my listening, slow down my reactions, slow down everything, and be a lot more intentional, especially at that time, to be more intentional with how I spoke, what I said, the words that I used, and making sure that we were communicating. And that was the most important thing.
Yeah, so I think that's really important to remember. What I do find myself doing when I speak to somebody who's from a different country and that obviously speaks English as a second language is I start to speak more slowly and over pronunciate every word. And it's like I maybe that was an exaggeration, but I
Yeah.
do tend to do that because when I went and learned to speak French fluently, that was the thing. Like you'd start to get the first part of the sentence, but by the time they got to the middle of it, you were starting to get lost. And then this last part, you're like, okay, I really don't know what you just said. I know it was something about like, you want to eat something and then something else after that. And I really have no idea. They could have
Yeah.
asked me if I felt like eating, you know, cheveau or horse, right? So yeah,
Right,
I have no idea, right?
right. Yeah. The thing that I find is what's best to do is to kind of speak in the same pace that you would normally speak, slow down just a little bit and not too exaggerated, because when you slow down exaggerated, you make the other person feel that you think that they're dumb, or that they can't, that they can't catch up with you.
Yeah,
But
I
if
could
you
see
s-
that.
but if you slow down just a little bit, and you take pauses and allow
Mhm.
for pauses and space, it doesn't sound as exaggerated, and it gives them an opportunity to hear and understand what you're saying without making them feel stupid.
Right.
And then it also gives them the opportunity to say, "Oh, will you please slow down? I didn't understand that word," or "I don't understand what you're saying." Then you have all this space to work with, right? It's like, oh, okay, now you can slow down and you can enunciate better, and you can maybe even explain the word that you're using so that they know what you're talking about. But initially, it's best to slow down just slightly, slow enough that you sense it, but not that they don't sense it. And
Mhm.
then to put space in between,
Well, I think
like I'm
that's good
doing now.
advice for anybody because
Yes.
I just listened to an episode of Hidden Brain, which is a very popular podcast. And
Mhm,
I'll post a link to this one in this episode so people can go to it. I'm
mhm,
not going to have a chance to look it up, so I don't remember the researcher at this point. But they did a deep study. They got some people together from California and from New York over a dinner, right? And these are all English speakers. They're
mhm.
all speaking the English language. They all understand one another. There's no problem there, right? But there were regional habits that were quite different. And the regional habit that was much different was that New Yorkers didn't pause as much between ideas. And so it always sounded like they might have been interrupting one another. And so the Californians felt like they couldn't get a word in edgewise, or like the New Yorker might have been a little bit rude or disrespectful because they were talking over other people when really it was just excitement and they were keeping the conversation going. And the New Yorker, on the other hand, would start to feel uncomfortable because the Californian person wasn't saying something yet. So now they're filling the silence. And so this is just a conversational difference that I think we could
Yeah.
all benefit from learning a little bit about, maybe getting
You
comfortable
know,
with a
it's
pause.
so it's so funny that you said I am a New Yorker
Mm,
and I lived in California.
mhm,
And so I can totally see what you're saying, because you're right. In New York, we're going a mile a minute. And that's why a lot of times people do feel that New Yorkers are brash, or they're insensitive, or they're not listening. And it's not true. It's just that the pace that you're going in New York requires you to speak quickly. I've lived in New York, I've lived in Atlanta, and I've lived in California. And reading the room has always been incredibly important.
mm,
When I went from the Northeast down to the Southeast, and I was on the phones. I was a customer service rep, and I would answer the phone. I would answer it and quickly say what I was saying. And then the other person on the other line would say, hi. And I would go, oh my God, it's going to be a long conversation because you knew the length that it took them to say hi also was going to be, well, I was calling because, and it's a very Southern thing because it's a slower pace. And here's this New York girl going, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, and I really had to then also retrain myself to slow down because this was after Korea. This is after teaching conversational
Mhm.
English. And you're in the United States. And like you say, we're speaking the same language, but regionally, we are so different.
Right.
Then I went to California. I was like, wow, this is a really much slower pace than I expected, right? And it's the same with the speech. It's just that from New York, when you get there, it's electric. You get
Mhm.
there and you feel the fast pace. No matter what you're doing, you feel that it's electric and it's going and we're doing this and I just came from New York last week, and I love it. I love the city. I love the pace. I love the people because I know New Yorkers and I know that
Mhm.
they have the big hearts. They're there for people. They just do it faster.
See, and for me, I live in California and have most of my life, but I'm like a fish out of water. I go to New York and I'm like, I get this. I'm at this pace. I'm ready to go? And so it's just, I don't tend to like super crowded places. I like living more countryside, but I'm the fastest walker. People tease me in Hawaii. Hey, lady, you're on Hawaii. Slow down. I'm just like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
It's like the elevator. How come it's so slow? I have stuff to do.
Yeah.
Chop, chop. I'm going to get to my vacation right now.
Right, right. It's a matter of it's always a matter of simply going. We have to remind ourselves of those things all the time, right? I have to remind myself. Sometimes I'm driving and I'm going really slow because I live out in the country and the speed limit the fastest speed limit is 40.
Mhm.
So you're driving 30, 35 most of the time. And then I driving down to New York and get to Connecticut and I'm like, "Oh, I got to pick up the pace here. And by the time you get to New York, you're like, "Oh, don't cut me off. I'm a New York driver. Don't even try it. I know I have mass plates." It's
Yeah, you'll almost
incredible.
need to stop and change the plates. You'll be treated differently.
Exactly.
Might be illegal. Let's see.
Yeah.
So I want to dive into a conversation that I've been having in different communities as I do podcasting, but also, with my husband and other people around me, which relates to something that touches on a lot of your expertise. And that's this concept of changing language, because language is constantly changing.
Yeah.
And what we're now hearing more about, which is terms like microaggression and how like HR companies or the HR divisions within companies are now even starting to send things out to educate us on, the roots of certain terms and why they might be offensive and how we might navigate or change or shift our vernacular because of the roots of language. So I wanted to hear your perspective, like how you bring this up and help demystify what microaggressions really are and how we can all be more supportive. It's a big
Well,
question, I know.
it's a huge
Sorry, put you on the spot, right?
It's okay. So, microaggressions, first of all, they don't always have to be micro. Sometimes they're very blatant and but they're aggressions. And so when I think of microaggressions, it's not always the words you use. So, which is why I'm listening to your question. I'm going, let's split it up. It's not always the words you use. It's sometimes how you use words that are okay to use. For example, I was in North Dakota with my then fiance. So he's my husband now. He's from North Dakota. He's a white man. And we were taking a walk and we were coming up to these students And one of the kids broke away from the group and walked towards us and walked past us and said hello. And I knew that there was something up. She walked past us, said hello, we said hello, and then we kept going. Then as we got to the students, one of them said, "What's up?" That was the microaggression. It wasn't what they said, because you can say what's up to anybody. It was the way they said it. And I knew that that was a microaggression. We kept walking. And then they started acting out behind us. And that's neither here nor there. It was not a good situation. And that's just to say that sometimes microaggressions simply sometimes are, especially when we're talking about wording and words. Yes, there are some words that you don't want to use. I don't like the word tolerance. I hate it when people use the word tolerance to say that we need to be more tolerant of people, because I don't find it to be a benevolent word. I find it to be very offensive, actually. What you're saying is you may not like it, but you're going to do it anyway. And nobody likes to be told to do that. And there are words like grandfathered, which you a lot of us don't know comes from during Reconstruction, when Black men were given the right to vote. They put in these rules where now, if you could only vote if your grandfather had had the opportunity to vote. So that meant that who could vote? White men could vote, right? Not Black men, because their grandfathers were enslaved people.
See, that's another one I had no idea. I
Yeah.
had no idea that's where that came from. It's ignorance, right? But like,
Yeah, but you listen, you hear, you learn, you grow. But microaggressions a lot of times has to do with the thought and the emotion that you put behind something that you're saying, and sometimes you may not even realize that that's what you're doing. I had someone on my podcast, Kevin. Oh gosh, I can't remember his last name, Kevin, but he told a story of how he was walking on campus, and towards some white people coming towards him. There was a white person in front of him, and the person who was coming towards them said hello to the white person in front of him. And then when he got to him, they were like, "What's up?" Right? And that's something that, you experience as a microaggression. But for example, Corinna, if I were to come to you and say, somebody said to me, "What's up?" You're going to go, and
yeah,
right?
like, are you being oversensitive
Like,
about
are
this one?
exactly,
That's what people, yeah. Mhm.
exactly. When the thing is, I can say to you, you weren't there, you don't understand. But even if you were there, you may not understand. Even if
I
you
might not have seen it. I might not have
you would
understood.
not have seen it, you would not have understood. My fiance was there. He didn't see it. He didn't understand it until I explained it to him later. And then he
Mhm.
felt terrible. But that wasn't the point. The point was for him to understand that he's getting married to a Black woman. And he's going to have to kind of open his eyes a little bit more and more and more, which he has. Those are the types of things that we endure, and that's why they're called microaggressions. They're things that we endure that we can't necessarily report or really speak about to other people, because they're not going to understand what we mean by that. And we carry it because we know what it was, because of what was behind it. And what was behind it is not something that you can prove. It's something that you can sense and that you can feel, right? It's it's like when people sense spirits,
Yeah.
if you want to put it that way. You may not see it, you may not feel it, but they do. It's very real. It's a very real thing when someone says, that shouldn't have happened. And someone else is like, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about. You're really being too sensitive. Are you just reading into it?" It's not that. It's usually, believe someone if they tell you that a certain thing was a microaggression, because they're seeing it from a perspective that you are never going to be able to see it.
So I want to draw people's attention to something else, because I think that anybody who's experienced sexual harassment, it can kind of really closely touch some of the same stuff, because the law essentially says that it has to be really blatant and repetitive, but you
Yes.
could be harassed in an ongoing way through these little minor things where someone looks you up and down every day you come into the office and
Yes.
says, "Wow, you look great today," or "I
And it's and
like
it's
that dress on you," or
and
whatever.
it's
It could
not
be
about what they
constant.
say necessarily. It's about how they say it,
Right,
right?
the tone, the look,
Exactly.
every little thing. So I think if we make it real in that way, like if you're a woman that's been in the workplace and felt like you were kind of belittled that way in an ongoing capacity, it's kind of the same sort of thing. That's what we're talking about here, right?
Mhm. Yes.
My husband works for Joby Aviation, and the company sent out a notice about microaggressions, right? And he
Mhm.
was going through the list and read some of them to me, and I was like, I had no idea. I had no idea. I had no idea. And there was so many of them that I'm just like, I'm going to step on a landmine someday and have no idea that I even did. Just like with what you just mentioned, grandfathered, which I'm not sure if it was in the list because he didn't give it to me to read. It's a company communication. He was just like, did you know that no can do is a negative
Mhm.
reference to Asian Americans when they were
Yeah,
making fun of how they would say things in a structural way in a sentence? I'm like,
exactly.
I had no idea. I thought you were just,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
almost Yodaizing something, right? So you just
Yes.
reverse the language a little bit. But
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense now that I
But
know.
and it's quite possible. I mean, I remember when Star Star Wars Episode 1 came out and people were very annoyed by Jar Jar Binks.
Mhm.
These
For a
things
lot
can
of
creep
reasons.
these things can creep
Yeah.
in, right? They creep into technology. They creep into our arts. They creep into so many things that we do not realize, and they're just there,
Well,
and
in
it's
that case,
effective.
I mean, I had a problem with that, like, on day 1, so I'm sure a lot of people did. And then we see Disney making apologies for something that I didn't have as much issue with, and I'm like, "Yeah, what's really happening here?" Like, but I also get it, like, we just need to be more, I think, aware of
Yeah.
what our prejudices and pre-assessments of a people are, and when we're basically making them into a stereotype and then assigning a character to it that may not present that culture or people in like the best light. It's like making fun of it just in doing so. And I think
Right.
that's, what we're seeing in evolution now where people are actually starting to be more sensitive to this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important. I think it's a really great thing that we become more sensitive to each other, that we learn more about each other. I've lived this life as a Black woman. That is my experience as a Black Haitian woman. That is, I have several layers on there for different things. Um, I've never walked this earth as a white woman. I've never walked this earth as a trans woman. I've never walked this earth as someone who is LGBTQ. So I have to defer to them to say what is offensive or hurtful to them and to their experiences, because I don't know what I could do that may be hurting them. But my job is not to disregard what they say they're feeling. My job is to say, I did not realize that. What would be a better way to go? And that's what I want more people to do when they encounter racial microaggressions, right?
Mhm.
To Black people and to Brown people and to Asian people. Um, if someone says, that's a little offensive, don't get defensive and don't feel bad, because feeling bad is not necessarily going to help. Don't feel bad and get uh, um, just clam up, but you're going to feel something. You're going to feel discomfort. You're going to feel uncomfortable, but then ask so that you can understand better why it was offensive, why it caused hurt, why it impacted the way that it did. And then move forward, because then you can build trust. And that person will then feel better the next time to say, hey, please don't say that, you know,
Hmm.
and you'll be like, oh, really? Why? And it'll be a much easier conversation. Then you begin to normalize this conversation of, this is my perspective. Okay. Thank you for sharing that with me, right? Back and forth. Now we're actually having a conversation about this rather than there being a wall put up and no conversation. And
Well, and
therefore,
we're right back to
back to our
conversation.
corners. Exactly.
This is where we started, right? Like, and I think it comes down to respecting the individual
Yeah.
and really trying to understand how another person might experience life, how another person might experience language, how a term could affect somebody. And ultimately, if we are kind of just brazenly saying, well, you're just being oversensitive and I'm going to go on the way I've been going on,
Hmm.
eventually, that's really going to hurt somebody,
Yeah.
or it will alienate you so much from a group of people that you might want to be associated with, that you'll find yourself alone eventually on an island in
Right.
some other way. So I
Right.
think I think that's important. I know that we're still getting to
Hmm.
a spot where people are getting comfortable with this shifting language around gender,
Hmm.
and referring to someone as them or they as opposed to he or she. uh, I imagine that difficulty will continue for many people. And
Hmm.
one of the things that I counsel people in my community to do is just say, hey, like when you slip, own it, and try to do better next
And do
time.
better.
Yeah. And, so if I don't care if I'm referred to as a she or her or them or they, I mean, I don't care. I'm like, it's fine for me.
Right.
I identify mostly as a woman. I have a female body I was born into, but there was a period of time when I was younger when I wasn't so sure about that. And I felt really alone and out of place. And when you feel really alone and out of place, you're already otherized in a way. And I don't
Hmm.
even know if that's a word. I use it. I think people understand what I mean.
Yes.
But, if you feel like you're other, you're disconnected, you're
Yes.
more likely to become depressed, feel isolated, have that slippery slope lead to something else that could end in suicidal tendencies that are
Hmm.
very unhealthy. And we don't want to be pushing people in that direction. So I
Yeah.
think if we can just be generally more accepting and loving in how we approach one another, then we'll build a better future. We'll have more equity. We won't be sitting here kind of feeling like we have to dance around topics. And who knows, we might not develop such stereotypical verbal tendencies that could be offensive to
Yeah.
somebody in the first place, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Now, one of the questions I ask many of my guests is, if they have a charity that they want to support or a company they want to feature during our talk. And you mentioned specifically a company that I was already familiar with. So I didn't have to do any research because I read an entire case study on them, and that is Kiva.
Hmm.
So I wanted to offer you the opportunity to share why you think Kiva is a company we should know about, and then also offer you some of my own thoughts.
When I donate through Kiva, I donate mainly to women. And there's very specific reason for that. But I like Kiva because it allows people to take ownership of what they do. It doesn't say here, we're going to do for you. It says here, we're going to give you the funds so that you can do what it is that you want to do for yourself. We're going to help you do this, because a lot of times it's the access to money that's not available. The reason that I mostly donate to women, invest in women, is because I believe that women around the world are, if you can uplift women around the world, you will uplift a whole full society. Women, historically, that has been their role. If the women in the village or the city or the count, whatever it is, if women are banded together, if women are doing and are enterprising, the whole community benefits. Women tend to take care of their community. It's not necessarily the way of men. I think that it is more of a feminine thing, but that's one of the reasons why I mostly donate to women on Kiva, and the being able to build their businesses themselves is the reason that I donate to Kiva in the first place. I think that the idea of microloans is an incredible idea, and it is an incredible thing to allow people to be able to do what they want to do within their means. So that's why I choose Kiva.
Well, that's great. I learned about Kiva, and that's Kiva, kiva.org. Now, they are a I wouldn't call that a donation per se because you're investing, right?
Yes.
You're
Hmm.
making an investment in a particular individual, and you can actually find out about the people that are receiving your loan and the benefit that
Yep.
it's doing in their community. Some of the earlier controversy that they ran into, this was a co-founded company by two Stanford graduates. They decided they wanted to break into microlending and help level up people in other communities around the globe. They ran into some controversy because some of their repayment practices early on, they didn't realize they were kind of essentially operating through a sort of VIG system, and local
Hmm.
enforcers were
Mm.
perhaps doing some things that weren't above board that they didn't really know about. So they've had to
Mm.
tighten things up and really kind of grow because they
Right.
exploded very, very quickly.
Right.
And so, what I like about Kiva now in their present state is that they're still doing all of those things, but in a very mindful way. And the nefarious practices have been extricated from the company. So, if you
Yeah.
happen to have read about any of that at any point, you don't have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
But you can do donations in as small of amount donations or investments rather as I think
Investments.
$5, and repayment is something like 96%. So most of the funds that people
Yes.
donate actually gets back to them, and it potentially could also grow, and then
Yes.
you could choose to reinvest that money and kind of keep the cycle going over a long period of time.
Yes.
So I
That's the
love
other
that.
thing I really like about that.
Hmm.
Whenever I get repayments, um, it's money that I've already invested anyway, that is already in their system. So
Hmm.
I just reinvest it
Hmm.
in another person. If I paid $25 and that $25 keeps going and going and going and going, I think that's great.
Yeah, that's right. So you're just helping somebody else. It's like
Yeah,
paying it forward. That same money can actually be paid forward multiple times and
multiple
create more
times.
good. Yeah.
Yeah,
I love that. I
yeah.
think that's a phenomenal model for that reason. And so anyone here can go ahead and go to kiva.org. Neither of us is compensated for this. We're just,
Not at
speaking
all.
out. And International Women's Day falls on March 8th. There's
Awesome.
a sign up where you can actually get $50 to lend just by signing up. So it's some sort of promotion that they're doing right now for International Women's Day.
Yeah.
And I just want to say overall, everyone here, I mean, this I think has been a really good conversation about the power of language and our own personal power to make a more equitable present life for people living right now and in the future.
Yes.
So I want to also invite you, however, just to offer any closing thoughts. If you have a question that I haven't asked that you wish I had, or if you have a closing thought that you'd like to leave our audience with.
My main thing is that I work with entrepreneurs and small businesses. And the reason that I've chosen that demographic is because it is pretty much 99% of the businesses in this country employing about 49% of the workforce. And a lot of times that demographic, that section of the workforce doesn't believe that they have a voice or that they can make a difference or that it even matters for their business to be involved in conversations about equity, inclusion, social justice, or diversity. And it really is because if they're not involved in this conversation, that's 50% of the population that is saying it's not my problem or it's not something that I can do anything about. But what we all need to understand, and what I like to let people know and understand, is that you as an individual, you are part of that company. You make up your industry, you make up your business, you make up your company. And so when you take ownership and your power back and you put it back into your business, just like we're investing in Kiva, and you put it back into your business and your business puts it back into the workforce, you are actually making a huge difference. So if you have questions or concerns, or if you're just confused about any of this, I would be more than happy to work with you. But I think it's so important that small businesses really take ownership of the part that they can play in dismantling and changing the way that we do things.
Well, I think that's a perfect note on which to end. And what I will say to everybody listening today or watching on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you happen to be absorbing this content, that you can find out more about Sedie and everything that she is working to do through her website, which is simply diversitydish.com. You can also listen to her podcast. I encourage you to add it to your feed. It's simply delightful. And she edits all of those shows herself. And so she deserves a round of applause from all of us for doing it, because I have to tell you, that's a lot of work. So thank you, Sedie, for everything you're doing in the world of podcasting. You very much deserve that award, and I hope you see another one come soon.
Thank you so much, Corinna. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Well, it's that time, isn't it? At this point in our conversation, I like to ask all of you to act. It doesn't have to be huge. It could be as simple as going to diversitydish.com, adding Sedie's podcast to your feed, or just sharing this episode with those in your community that you think would benefit from it. In my humble opinion, that would be pretty much everybody. You could even just grab their phone, add this to their playlist, and hand it right back. Now, if you want to learn more, and if you're thinking about what you can do personally to be more of the change that you want to see in the world, I invite you to visit caremorebebetter.com. I will include links to everything we discussed today in show notes, including that episode of The Hidden Brain that I mentioned at the top of the show. You'll also find links to Sedie's work, her social channels, what we're doing in the community, and also, if you sign up for our newsletter, you can actually get a 5-step guide to unleash your inner activist. Each of us can be a part of the change, and it will take all of us to move in a more positive direction. Thank you, listeners, now and always, for being a part of this pod and this community, because together, guess what? We can do so much more. We can care more, and we can be better. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.